Hello class, my lecture today is a supplement to the readings you had so far. If you have questions after you listen to my lecture, feel free to contact me. I hope this lecture gives you a good background of what evaluation is and what it takes to do an evaluation. Our textbook did a good job defining the term evaluation. Basically, evaluation as defined by Patton answers three basic questions. What, so what, and what now? In other words, every time you do an evaluation, ask yourself, what is it that you are evaluating? What is the program about? And then ask, so what's the point of doing the evaluation? What's its significance? Finally, after you conduct your evaluation, you have to ask, based on your findings, what now? What's your recommendations, or what are your recommendations? You know, evaluation is not easy. You have to make your own professional judgment. And what I mean by professional judgment is making an assessment based on experience, evidence, and or theory. Now, for most of our class, we'll be talking about utilization-focused evaluation. Now, everyone who does evaluation uses this type of evaluation practice. Actually, many times, evaluators use traditional evaluation practices. And what's the difference between utilization-focused evaluation and the traditional evaluation practice? Now, we'll talk about that in the next slide. For now, let me define utilization-focused program evaluation. Now, according to Patton, utilization-focused program evaluation is evaluation done for and with specific intended primary users for specific intended use. So, here's the difference between traditional and utilization-focused evaluation. Traditional evaluation is evaluator-centered. That is, evaluators run the show. They develop the evaluation goals and objectives, and they design and implement the evaluation plan with very little user support consultation. The evaluator basically tells the user what to do. In utilization-focused evaluation, the user is the center of the show. The evaluator acts more like a moderator, asking the users what it is that they want to get out of their evaluation. The evaluator makes suggestions and allows the users to make the choice for the evaluation plan. The evaluator gives the advantages and disadvantages of a particular evaluation plan. Another difference between the two types of evaluation practice is that the traditional evaluation tend to be focused on reliability and validity of methods and results. In other words, the principles of science is the top priority in traditional evaluation. Evaluators are concerned with making sure that it is actually the program, which is usually labeled as the independent variable, that influences the outcome, or the dependent variable. And the outcome usually is the intended or the outcome behavior. For example, if the program is for prevention of smoking, the outcome behavior that they will be looking at would be not smoking or avoiding smoking. In the utilization-focused evaluation, it focuses more on the usefulness of the results for the improvement of the program. It is not so much concerned whether the independent variable actually influenced the dependent variable. It is concerned on whether the outcome was achieved regardless of variables other than the intervention that led to the outcome. It is not a failure that a particular desired outcome was not achieved, but rather what else can be done to achieve the desired outcome. So that's utilization-focused evaluation. Now lastly, because the traditional form of evaluation is focused on making sure the results are reliable and valid, it is not adaptable to the context or situation. It tries its best to control the situation. As for the utilization-focused evaluation, it always adapts to the context and situation of where and when the program is being implemented. Again, it does not matter whether the results are less reliable and valid as compared to traditional evaluation. What matters in a utilization-focused evaluation is how to adjust evaluation to capture important measures of success in achieving the desired outcome. Now, there are distinct differences between evaluation and research. Although I must admit that sometimes the line between the two can be blurred. Now, here are the 4 distinct differences between evaluation and research according to Patton. Evaluations are done to inform decisions, while research is done to discover new knowledge. Evaluation tries to clarify options, while research tests theories. Finally, evaluation provides information about program and policies within contextual boundaries of time, place, values, and politics, while research goal is to generalize across time and space. So again, there are differences between evaluation and research. Now here are some more key terms that you should be familiar with. Now, primary intended users are the decision makers of evaluation based on a utilization-focused evaluation principle. Now, they work with the evaluator to figure out the evaluation criteria for judging program success. They also help select methods and timeline for the evaluation. Stakeholders are the people who have vested interest in evaluation findings. They include program funders, staff, administrators, and clients or program participants. They also include the primary intended users. Remember, as I have mentioned in one of our discussions, most, if not all, principal intended users are stakeholders, but not all stakeholders are primary intended users. The third key term there is personal factor. Now, personal factor, again according to Patton, is the presence of an identifiable individual or group of people who personally care about the evaluation and the findings it generates. As evaluators, it's important to find out who these personal factors are. They are better suited to help us, evaluators, shape our evaluation plan. Now, the textbook doesn't really go over the different types of evaluation. Anyway, I'd like to get your attention to the 3 types of evaluation. There is a formative evaluation, process evaluation, and outcome evaluation. Now, formative evaluation is also known as developmental or implementation evaluation. It's the evaluation done to help or plan or design an intervention. Process evaluation, on the other hand, focuses on how a program was or is implemented and how it operates. You know, we have a whole textbook on process evaluation, and it's written by or edited by Steckler and Lennon. Finally, outcome evaluation focuses on the intermediate and direct effects of the intervention to the program participants. This is usually what stakeholders would like to see in an evaluation. They want to know the impact of the program to its clients or program participants. Alright, I have more key terms here. Another key term to keep in mind is a type 3 error. And so what's a type 3 error? Well, it's an error, you know, you're familiar with type 1 and type 2 error, and it deals with whether or not you are rejecting the null hypothesis falsely or correctly. Now, type 3 error is a different type of error. It's the error that occurs as a result of a program not adequately being implemented. So, if process evaluation is not implemented, evaluators are likely to have a type 3 error. You know, how can you be sure if you're not doing a process evaluation that the intervention that you are implementing actually is the one that leads to the outcome that you are seeing? So it's important to do a process evaluation to avoid a type 3 error. The other key term that you should be aware of are the terms that you can find on page 12 of process evaluation textbook. They are the following terms that these terms that you should be familiar with are context, reach, dose delivered, dose received, fidelity, implementation, and recruitment. So make sure you check out the definitions of those concepts. Okay, now traditional evaluators will want to avoid the following threats to internal validity. Now, what is internal validity? Well, when we talk about internal validity, we basically are referring to how valid is our finding that the actual intervention that we are having or implementing leads to our desired outcome. Okay, this is in contrast to external validity, and when we talk about external validity, we are mainly referring to how generalizable our findings are. Anyway, for evaluation, we are concerned about internal validity, at least if we are doing a sort of a traditional evaluation. Let me go briefly the different types of threats to internal validity. So, what can what can affect the internal validity of our evaluation? One is selection. Selection basically means participants may be unliked in some way, so they will respond in different ways to the independent variable or the program. So usually the program is the independent variable here, and the participants or the participants' behavior is the outcome or dependent variable. So first threat to internal validity is selection. Second is mortality, also known as loss to follow-up. So when participants drop out of the intervention, we cannot be sure that what is left, or the participants that are left in the program, are the ones that are actually more likely to change their behaviors to the desired outcome. Also, in a traditional evaluation, usually there are two groups. One is the intervention group, where the implementation of the program, where the program is provided for a certain group of participants, and the other group is the control group or the comparison group, where they do not receive the intervention. So when there is loss to follow-up, especially in the intervention group, then it is hard or difficult to make some comparisons. The third threat to internal validity is history. Now, history is when outside events occur during the course of the experiment or intervention, and so it affects the dependent variable, or if we are talking about behavior as an outcome, the behavior. So for example, during the time when if you had a AIDS prevention intervention back in the 80s, when Magic Johnson announced that he had AIDS, the awareness about AIDS actually increased. And so it is not necessarily that your intervention is doing a good job in increasing awareness about AIDS, but rather there is a famous person who happened to have AIDS that affected the outcome of increased awareness to AIDS. Maturation is the fourth threat to internal validity, and it's the change that is due to aging or development, either between or within groups. And when we talk about groups, it's the intervention group or the treatment group versus the control or comparison group. So sometimes, because the intervention is long, the intervention participants grow up, and they're, because of their aging and because of their development, their behaviors change as well, and it's not necessarily brought about by the intervention itself. The fifth one is repeated testing. When participants are tested repeatedly, they tend to score better. So if you are testing the participants with such a short amount of time between the tests, it is possible that they will score better. Sixth is instrumentation. Instrumentation occurs when the reliability of the instrument changes in calibration. So it can be you have a bad measuring device, or sometimes instrumentation occurs from a change in human ability to measure differences, and sometimes it's just due to fatigue or experience. So sometimes when we are collecting data, or our data collectors are tired, they do not get to put in the right numbers if they're measuring something. Um, the next threat to internal validity is regression to the mean. If a certain measure is not extremely reliable, there will be some variations between repeated measures, and the chances are that the measurements will move towards a mean instead of towards extreme. So again, if your measure is not reliable, you're going to have problems with regression to the mean. Eighth is experimenter bias. Sometimes it is us evaluators who have some bias. We may have expectations of an outcome that may inadvertently influence our participants or cause experimenter or evaluator to view data in a different way. Another threat to internal validity is testing. Now, testing occurs when the participants gain more experience about the test that's provided to them. Now they become better at it. Then there is the placebo effect. Now the placebo effect basically is the improvement in the participants' behavior or outcome due to expectation rather than the treatment itself, rather than intervention. Now, Hawthorne effect is when the participants in the intervention know that they are being observed, and so they change their behavior to what is desired by the evaluator or experimenter. Contamination occurs when the control and comparison group are close to each other. For example, we know community A is the intervention group and community B is the control group, and again they are close to each other. It's possible that the intervention in community A will reach the community B, and this is also sort of the same idea with the diffusion of treatment. When the two communities are close to each other, there is that diffusion of intervention to the comparison group. Okay, for more of the definitions of these threats to internal validity, check out the website on the slide. I'll give you a copy of this slide so that you could copy and paste this website address. Now, again, we don't really these threats to internal validity are really not covered in our textbook, but it's good for you to know, and I'm sure that you'll encounter this again in your research tools and methods course or epidemiology if you haven't already. If you have more questions about this, again, feel free to ask me. Okay, pretty soon for this class, at least for your final project, you'll be developing an evaluation plan. So what are the steps to doing a utilization-focused evaluation? Because that's what you'll be doing for this class. Well, here are my 13 recommended steps. Number one, you need to identify your users and stakeholders of the program that you are wanting to evaluate. Once you identify them, then it is important to build relationship with the users and key stakeholders. Build rapport. Also important is to find the personal factor. Who has the personal factor among the users and key stakeholders? Once you find the key, once you build a relationship with the users, key stakeholders, and you have found the personal factor, the third step is to learn about the program, its context, etc., by talking with the users and or key stakeholders. So really learn about what they do in the program, who is involved, what sort of activities are implemented in the program, what is the program mission, goals, and objectives. Learn about all those things. And after you learn about the program, now it's time for you to do your work. Conduct a literature review about the problem being addressed by the program and the interventions that have been used to address the problem being addressed in the program. So it is important for you to learn a little bit more about how the problem develops, and how or find out what, if the program that is being implemented uses the same sort of principles and activities from a previous program. Okay, number 5. Meet with the intended users and get an understanding of their evaluation needs. Ask them about the goals, objectives, and evaluation questions that they hope to address. So you are going to be the moderators in a utilization-focused evaluation. It's not you who is dictating their goals, objectives, and evaluation questions. It is for you to listen. It is your job to listen and to ask the right questions. And asking the right questions are sometimes the toughest thing to do. Number 6 step: develop a logic model. Share with the users and let the users revise the logic model as needed. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it's good when the program that you're evaluating has their own logic model already. However, sometimes you'll find that they don't have a logic model yet, and it is hard to ask, it is difficult or challenging to ask the users to develop a logic model for them, for themselves. So it's important to get, it is important for you as an evaluator to get this process going. So develop a logic model based on your literature review of the problems and the programs related to addressing these problems, and show it to the intended users and see how they want to modify that or revise that. Now, number 7 step is agree on how you will measure or observe your objectives. Make sure that every time you write your objectives or guide your users in writing their objectives, that they are measurable or observable. Now, share your expertise and creativity about measures based on your literature review. Because sometimes they will ask you, I don't know how to measure resiliency. So it is your job as evaluator to make some suggestions on how resiliency have been measured in previous studies. Number 8, agree on an appropriate evaluation methods to keep track of the progress and successes and challenges of the program. And usually this is a pretty tough step, because you are now challenging the users themselves on what they want to see, and you will produce a work based on what your users want to see in terms of methodology that you're going to be using. Is it within their budget? You cannot really suggest a method that will not be cannot be done because they don't have enough budget for it. So it's your job to ask the right questions again with the right questions to the intended users. Give them different scenarios, different methods on how you can measure the objectives that they have proposed. Okay, we're almost done here. Step 9, develop an evaluation plan based on the user's evaluation expectations, and then have the users approve of the plan. So in this class, you will go up to step 9, that you will develop an evaluation plan based on the user's evaluation expectations. And hopefully, the evaluation plan that you create is something that they approve of. After the evaluation plan is developed and been approved, the next step would be to implement the evaluation plan and adjust evaluation needs and processes as needed that would be helpful for the user. Because as some of you may know, when you're implementing some program, things happen in the middle where you don't have any control of, and you may need to change your evaluation plan. So be prepared for that, and be prepared to talk with the users on how to better measure something that has changed in the program. Step 11, analyze the data. So after you've collected your data and put your data in a specific, quantitative or qualitative software, you need to analyze the data. After you analyze the data, you need to link the results to the context of the program. So after you have the data and the results, after you're analyzing the data and you have the results, then the next step is obviously to write reports. And depending on who the stakeholders are or your funders, you may have to write reports, quarterly or bi-weekly or sometimes, annually. It just depends on how long the program is. And this is something that you will learn from talking with your intended users. Okay, the final step, based on your findings, you may have to go back to step 5 to revisit the program goals and objectives. And that's okay. Evaluation is a circular process. You keep on doing it until you finally can come up with, until finally you and your users are satisfied with the outcome. And satisfied is obviously have different meanings. It could be the achievement of a particular outcome, or it could be the just knowing the next steps for the program to be improved. Okay, so that's all for now. That's all for now for my lecture. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the general class questions or comments. I think I went through some of these concepts pretty fast. So again, just ask the questions if you have any in the general class questions or comments. Thanks for listening, and I hope that you learned a lot in my lecture today.